Good afternoon, Chair, members. Are you folks okay to hear me? Yes?
We can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen here to do the presentation. Okay. So this is the legislative update through May. This is longer than the originally scheduled legislative session, which was supposed to have concluded actually at the beginning of May. But the legislature has been in recess since March 16th due to COVID-19 impacts. The legislature did reconvene early last week, May 11th, with a very short agenda of various bills, mostly surrounded around the budget for the next fiscal year, as well as COVID-related budget impact bills. And there are a number of boards and commission items that I wanted to just kind of highlight in one slide at the very end of this presentation. So the budget bill, the operating budget bill that the legislature took up is House Bill 2200. It was stalled briefly before they went into the COVID recess. So this was the bill that they purposefully restarted. It is the general appropriation bill that is moving through. As we're doing this presentation right now, the legislature is supposed to meet in session today with the expectation that they will pass this bill to the governor for approval. Here's some highlights where the bill currently stands as completed through the Senate Ways and Means, anticipated to pass out of the legislature. None of the university's Board of Regents operating budget items are included in the general appropriation bill. If you remember, we did have a fair amount of items, including Hawaii Promise funding. Because of the future revenue prospects, there is no additional new initiatives for any of the departmental items, including the University of Hawaii. One big item in the Senate draft of the budget, though, is to eliminate all vacant positions from every department. For the University of Hawaii, that equated to just under 758 full-time equivalent positions that have been eliminated from the UH budget. That represents about 11+% of the entire FTE count in the UH operating budget. There will undoubtedly be operating and operational issues with the elimination of vacant positions. The general thought from the legislature is that departments won't be able to hire, or there will be an implemented hiring freeze with the elimination of vacancies. However, the way vacancies are managed or used in the operating budgets will have an implication and an impact. So this is something the university will have to adapt and will be having to develop plans to accommodate if the governor is to sign the budget and this provision is implemented in FY21. On the positive side, HB 2200 as it currently stands actually doesn't change the previous appropriation bill from last session for fiscal year 21, Act 5. That also probably will have to get revised. Legislature will likely make changes to the general fund dollar appropriation amounts, taking into account a Council on Revenues meeting that's scheduled to occur on May 28th. So before the legislature adjourns, I expect there will have to be some revisions to general fund appropriations. On the capital improvement side, there's a CIP budget also that is moving through the legislature right now and is anticipated set to pass today. As you can imagine, there's been significant revisions to our CIP ask Right now on the Senate draft of the budget, we're looking at a very thin CIP budget relative to what we had initially requested of the legislature, starting at about 230 plus million. I expect that there will likely be further revisions to the CIP appropriation, also as the legislature and the executive move through with additional examination on the revenues and how bond appropriations can work relative to federal funding or stimulus funding or shovel-ready projects. So this is the current status in the Senate draft, but I think before the legislature concludes completely for the end of the fiscal year, that we could expect that there will be likely additional CIP appropriations. So the next section of this presentation, I'm just going to quickly go through what are the budget, what were the bills taken up during this interim recess period. There were other bills, but the agenda has been very short, and this represents the majority of bills taken up, but it's not all of the bills. House Bill 1631, this is not specifically related to UH, but it is the General Obligation Bond Authorization Bill. The significance of this bill is its tie-in to the CIP budget, the operating budget, but also the federal stimulus acts that provide for additional funding support to the states in terms of issuing debt and authorizing bonds. House Bill 2200 we just went through, that's the general appropriation bill, and House Bill 2725 is the capital improvement projects bill representing the chart that I just showed you. Senate Bill 75 is an appropriations bill specifically for COVID impact. The significance of this bill is that there's CARES Act funding authorization to the counties and the various departments that are providing COVID-related services. There's also stuff in this bill related to how the state will draw down or bring in CARES Act funding that the state can later deploy to various departments. So they want to. The legislature is envisioning using some CARES Act funding into one of the state's reserve funds, such as the Emergency Budget Relief Fund or the Hurricane Relief Fund. And from there, it can be later deployed through appropriations after more is known on the fiscal condition going into FY21. Senate Bill 3139 is the bill that I just mentioned related to the Emergency Budget Reserve Fund, but this bill specifically would replace what is customarily general fund appropriations into the EBRF or the rainy day fund and supplants it with general obligation bond proceeds so that the state could preserve cash into the operating budget. And then House Bill 117 is a bill to defer or suspend what was already scheduled as salary increases for the judiciary, for judges, and for cabinet level executive branch appointees, as well as the legislators. The Salary Commission last year issued a report with 6 years of additional salary increases for the executive and judiciary and the legislators. This bill would suspend for 1 year the scheduled increase that would have taken effect on July 1st and January 1st for the legislature. And then lastly, there is a number of governor appointees to various boards and commissions were mentioning here specifically those that are administratively attached to the University of Hawaii. So the Center for Nursing Advisory Board, the Hawaii Medical Education Council, the Hawaii Commission for National and Community Service, and the Research Corporation of University of Hawaii, RCUH. Those nominees have been taken up and have made it through recommendation to the full Senate for consent. The one that is missing here, obviously, is Board of Regents. There's 2 seats that the governor's office has not sent down yet for nominees. There is still time for the legislature to take those up if the governor was to send those down before the end of session. The legislature is anticipated to reconvene after this recess sometime around mid-June. So that would be the optimal time to take up that confirmation if the governor was to send it down. And with that, happy to answer any questions any of the members may have, Chair.
Thank you, Vice President Young. Are there any questions of...
I have one for Kalbert.
All right, Regent McInerney.
Yes. You have a negative number of $1,700,000 in the Senate bill, and your first slide there. I don't recall ever seeing a negative number in any of the slides you presented before. What does that represent?
I'm sorry, negative number.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, negative number on...
Yeah, go back up. Yeah, there it is right there. Oh, go back up one, yeah. $1,752,000 negative in system renew, improve, and modernize. Do we have to give back $1,752,000?
So actually there was...
81.
Right, so there was, last year we actually had biennium funding for CIP, and I believe this number just reduces what was previously appropriated.
Okay, so that I don't recall ever seeing that before. I was just wondering what it was. Thank you, Kalbert.
Any other questions of Kalbert? Thank you very much.
I had one, Chair.
Sorry.
No problem. So, Kalbert, what do you think is going to be covered in the June session?
Well, all bills other than the ones that we went over, and some other budget-related bills are still in suspense at the legislature. So non-budget, non-appropriation bills are still stalled where they currently are. So legislature could still take those up as regular business. But on the budget side, there's a whole bunch of individual appropriation bills, which likely will not move because of the prospects of tax revenues into FY21. However, the Council on Revenues is meeting next week, May 28th. And at that meeting, the council will forecast the tax revenues for the remaining year, as well as the additional tax revenues for FY21. I think everyone is expecting that forecast will be dire, and that it will result in the legislature and the governor having to change or revise what is expected to be the appropriation levels in HB 2200 for FY21. So legislature, I think, could use that opportunity when they come back in mid-June with the Council on Revenue's revised forecast to amend the budget for FY21, likely reducing the general fund appropriation numbers further. And they could also use that to decide what bills that they still have in suspense, even if they're non-appropriation bills, would the legislature actually want to move this year.